Greetings, family. We are live. I am absolutely delighted to be joining you again for another Ujama Day show on the Sista Shanice show platform. Thank you so much for joining me. And thank you so much for joining my guests as well, who are going to be with me a little later in the show today. Not too late, though, we hope. So welcome on board. And, as always, it's an absolute pleasure. It's always an absolute honor to be able to be with you on the Sista Shanice show. Please spread the word. Let everybody know that we are live. In fact, let me get the link myself as well and do some of the sharing behind the scenes. Okay, my guests will probably just be popping in at some point. Here we are. My guest has just popped up live and direct on the screen. Welcome, Ricardo. Pleasure to have you in the house. How are you doing? Okay, why am I not hearing you?
I muted myself. Sorry about that. How are you doing? A pleasure. Very honored to be with you, Chenise.
To have you join me here this evening on the Sista Shanice show. I'm going to introduce you to our audience in a very short while. I am just going to open up by reminding our audience of a couple of programs, a training program that I've got coming up, and also just to remind them of a couple of my books. So please bear with me, if you don't mind, while I do that with our audience. So family, is always absolute privilege, absolute honor to be able to be with you on the Sista Shanice show. Right, let's just make sure that I optimize sound, because I do have a little video that I would like to share with you. And let me go over to that now, and let's get into presenter view and then move it over to where it needs to be. Come on, I want to drag you over. Oh, come on, work with me. I want to show more of the screen than that. So family, as always, it's absolutely brilliant coming here on a Wednesday evening, as you can see.
Following on from the success of part one of the Dr.
On just a moment. Let me go back here. Here we go. Right. So as you know, family, I am working alongside Dr. Clyde Winters, and we are running part two of our Black History course. Most people, even those of us in Britain, family, are totally unaware of the fact that we have tens of thousands of years of history in Britain. Most of us are unaware that we as Africans were the first people of Britain. Can you believe it? Well, there's so much history that we have been researching and uncovering, and we are sharing that history with you in our 6 weeks online African History British training course. This one, sorry, it's an old... I just realized, no, it's starting on the 29th of April. Got to change that flyer. It's starting on the 29th of April. Let me go into our little advert right now.
Following on from the success of part one of the Dr. Winters and Sista Shanice Black History Study course, here comes part two. Brace yourself as we resurrect more hidden and whitewashed chapters of formidable African history in Britain. Our new groundbreaking 6-week online training course starts on Monday, the 29th of April 2024 from 7:30 through to 9:30 p.m, bringing you facts, evidence and history that your school won't teach you. If you are a Black history enthusiast, if you are a Black educationalist, parents homeschooling your children, Saturday school teachers seeking new material, then this course is for you. Black people have a greater connection to Britain and the British Isles than you could imagine. For registration or more information, go to sistershanice.gumroad.com. That's sistershanice.gumroad.com. Fee £199 with instalment options available. Book before the end of March and get an early bird discount of £50. Check out sistershanice.gumroad.com to download our free brochure. Check out sistershanice.gumroad.com to download our free brochure. See you there.
Oh, I certainly hope that I will be seeing you there, family. The first session was absolutely phenomenal. You may have missed the early bird, but hey, you can pay by installments, okay? So it's still all good. You know, we have an education system in the UK that is set up to fail us. And then they turn around and call us failures. The nerve, the cheek, the audacity, you know. And as we all know, history can actually empower you as a people, or it can make you feel absolutely worthless. And that's why it's so important for us as Africans to do our own research, to teach our history ourselves, and not to rely on the education or the miseducation system to do the training for us. They have actually conjured up a history for us as a people and have presented it to us as facts, when for the most part it's a distortion and a misrepresentation of our true history and who we are as a people. They've designed it to denigrate us and to relegate us to a position of inferiority. So make sure you know your history so that you can be empowered. That's what we want to do. Also, just to remind you that there are copies of my books available. You can get the remarkable accomplishments of Asian African civilization and a Black king of Anglo-Saxon England. Yes, I know he was the king of Mercia, but he was the king who actually began to form England into and shape it into the England as we know today, in terms of bringing all the counties together. And he was an influential king over the other minor kingdoms in England at the time as king of Mercia. And all of that is in my book. Phenomenal African Black king of Britain. But he was one of many kings of Britain, family, and I'll be doing more works on some of the others as well. You can get those 2 books on Amazon and free of charge. I also have a book that I've written as a tribute to Marcus Mosiah Garvey, the hugely inspirational freedom fighter, liberator of us as African people, phenomenal organizer, phenomenal entrepreneur, business-minded visionary leader. And if we have more young people with the mind of Marcus Mosiah Garvey, if we can have a generation of Garveyites, wow, family, the next generation, we will be on another level. Marcus Garvey, as we know, he influenced people like Kwame Nkrumah, people like Bob Marley, wrote his lyrics into his song. He's a national hero of Jamaica. Phenomenal, phenomenal visionary. And so, you know, get a copy of that free tribute. You can get that from my site on gumroad.com. So make sure you go over there and get that. Okay, family? Right, let me just end that right there, because I don't want to keep my guest waiting, because I know that he can't be with us for the entirety of the show today. But for the second part, we've got our brother Irritated Genie, who's going to be joining us on the show today. And so, beloved brother, we are absolutely delighted. Brother Riccardo, we're delighted to have you join us today on the Sista Shanice show, all the way from South Africa, one of the presidential candidates for the forthcoming election. I'm so excited to be interviewing you today. Beloved brother, you know, some of our viewers may not even be aware that there are elections going on in South Africa. Some of them may have never met you before or heard of you at all. And so we're going to actually start the show today by just introducing you. I know that you are a social activist leader on the ground in South Africa. You've been doing phenomenal works for many years now, and you are the author of the book, The Subversion of South Africa, and leader of the South African political party called Azania. You're going to be running for president of South Africa. First of all, my beloved brother, please introduce yourself to the Sista Shanice show family. I'm going to put you on full screen if I can do that. And behind, I am going to just be posting the link to some of my followers. Okay, let me see. Full screen. Okay, how can I spotlight you? Okay, let me just remove myself from the spotlight. Okay, you know what? Just go ahead, beloved brother. Please introduce yourself to the audience.
No, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. It's a great honor to be on your show. Thank you for the warm welcome that you've given me. It's an honor to speak to you and to your audience out there. As you mentioned, my name is Ricardo Maarman. I'm from South Africa, the eastern province of South Africa. Born in a small town called Graaff-Reinet in the Karoo. It's a semi-desert place. It's the same town. You've mentioned quite a list of great African leaders, and from the town that I come from, Professor Sobukwe, one of the great Pan-African leaders. We come from the same small town, and so he has affected my life and my way of looking at the world from a very young age. Not directly, but his great presence just looms large, over the small town there in South Africa. As you mentioned, I have a background in social activism. So I was, championing, a serious cause that happened a few years ago. That's what I championed all the way to the Constitutional Court, fighting vehemently for the rights and freedoms of South African people. As you know, during this time, 2 years ago, South African people were again forced to move around in the country with the passports, So we had to use a pass internally. Now, this was, ironically, I fought this fight now coming from Graaff-Reinet a few years ago, fought this fight because, as you know, people's movements were a bit restricted for the reasons that we know. And I took up that fight because if you wanted to move around in South Africa, you needed, now this recently, I'm sure everybody knows what I'm talking about. You needed to have a passport, a pass to move internally. Now, the last time this happened in South Africa was around, I think, the 1950s or so. And Professor Sobukwe, the founder of the Pan-African Congress of Azania, he took up that fight then against the pass. And he gave a rousing speech and really mobilized the people to burn their pass books. And that was what people, know as the massacre that took place in South Africa then in the 1960s. That started the uprise against oppression then. Hopefully my efforts then, my social efforts that I had will have the same result because that took me into a political route. Because as we will maybe discuss a little bit further here, as my political efforts unfold, South Africa was not freed in 1994. There was no miracle in 1994, contrary to what many people believe. Our people live still in dire conditions, poverty, oppression. We are not in control of our country and the beautiful and abundant natural resources that the Almighty has given us. So that is why I'm still continuing the fight. You mentioned, yes, of course, I am a candidate and I am, pursuing vigorously, the freedom of my people. And the only way that can be done is if a person like myself attains political power in the country to undo some of this hidden chains of oppression that still is wrapped around our people's necks. But unfortunately, what happened in this case, Sister Shanice, that the Electoral Commission of South Africa has barred me or has excluded me from participating in the national election. So this would be the election that would elect eventually the president. So I was told that I can only participate in the provincial election. Now I met all of the requirements. There was a requirement of a deposit that needed to be paid, signatures that needed to be handed in. I did all this, and then this is the result I get. Because you see, this is the 30th anniversary of so-called freedom. This is a 30th anniversary since 1994. Crucial elections. This is the time now that what we would call the cabal in South Africa are now changing government again. You must understand, almost every 30 years or so, they change from one form of government to the other, and we are at that point now. So it is important for the cabal to ensure there are certain people who would find it difficult or would be unable to compete. But what I have done now, Sister Shanice, I have called for a peaceful boycott against the elections under these circumstances. Because what we find, what I'm explaining to the South African people, and millions of them agree with me, there are people on the ballot that are not supposed to be there. People proven for their history of betraying our people. And there are people that are supposed to be on the ballot that are not on the ballot. And so we cannot continue like this. We cannot gamble with the future of our people. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, beloved. You know, absolutely shocking news, because I know that you met all of the requirements that needed to be met so that you could be, you know, one of the presidential candidates. So to hear now that you have been excluded, you know, and that you've been relegated to only being able to run for the provincial president is a big blow to me, and I'm sure it must be to you and all of your followers and all of your supporters. Clearly, you know, South Africa has seen the developments that's happening across the continent. There's been the recent elections in Senegal, where Senegal actually returned a young, youthful candidate. He wasn't one of the candidates that was funded by the major cabals, as they call the Jewish elite. You know, he wasn't from their stock. And, you know, we're seeing the move that's happening across the continent. Do you think maybe, you know, there was that fear that maybe there could be another upset in another part of Africa, such as South Africa, why you were removed? Or if not, what were the reasons that were given for removing you from the presidential candidate list, please?
Actually, no reasons were given. So our electoral commission here says that they don't legally, they are under no obligation to give me reasons. But I suspect that if push comes to shove and they are forced, that they would probably pull out of the bag some or other kind of technicality. Because as I can explain to you, that the overall requirements that was needed, which is the deposit and the signatures, these we've met hands down. So we waiting.
I'm sorry, how many signatures did you actually need in order to meet the requirements?
In order, you know, to challenge national, you needed to have signatures for one province at least. In our case, you know, we had signatures for 2 provinces, which is the Western province, Western Cape. That requirement was about 7,000 signatures. And then there is a requirement, you know, that we've met for the Gauteng province, which is the, you know, most populous province in South Africa, the capital of which is Johannesburg, in Gauteng province. There we've met the requirement of 8,000 signatures. So remember, as I said, to make it, to be on the national ballot, to compete for the presidency, you need to make enough signatures for 1 province. We've made enough for 2. And you need to provide a deposit of, in pounds, I think if it's 20 to the rand, that's about 20,000 pounds, I believe. That's the deposit that we have made. I'm just being corrected here. Excuse me, that is for dollars.
Oh.
Excuse me, so that is $20,000 as a deposit that we have paid. So these are the requirements that was necessary. These are requirements that we have met. Look, as I said to you, there is afoot in South Africa a major shift. So this is an election in 30 years where the political party of Nelson Mandela is about to lose power in the calculations and analysis of many people. And what awaits the South African people, we are not sure. Many South African people are not sure who they're going to vote for or what is going to happen. So we are sitting here on an unbelievable critical moment in history. And of course, as you know, South Africa is an incredibly rich and wealthy country. And so this is all at stake. This is all at stake. So it's not surprising that there are certain maneuvers around the elections.
Wow, it's not surprising at all. And especially so, if they've not given you a reason, we can only speculate as to what the reasons might be. And so, you know, certainly, you know, maybe some concerns about what's happening in other parts of the continent. But let me ask you this: you're suggesting that they boycott the elections, but then if the young people to boycott the elections, wouldn't that just return one of the old, you know, possibly the same old government? I mean, in Senegal, what Sonko did was, you know, he decided that this is the person that, you know, the Pan-Africanist that I want all of my voters to put their vote behind and actually join forces with the newly elected president. so that he could get all of his votes, coupled with all of the votes that he would have ordinarily got. And he's won the elections. And I'm sure, you know, he's going to be bringing, you know, Sonko into his cabinet. Are there any other presidential candidates who have been successful or are being allowed to run that maybe you could encourage all of your voters to put their votes behind? Or do you think you're still in a position where you can challenge the decision and get yourself on the presidential list? What is it looking like for you right now?
You know, this maybe to answer, you know, the first aspect of that before I answer the second aspect, which is, you know, what's happening on the African continent. The African continent, we are the richest continent on the planet, you know, contrary to what looks like around in the world. You know, there's being wool pulled over people's eyes. There is not an African country that I know that is poor. You know, we are being plundered. We are being betrayed by leaders amongst ourselves. Our biggest problem is the betrayal amongst leaders, you know, amongst ourselves that would collaborate with the Jewish elite to murder of, you know, some of our leaders of capacity. So I'm happy to see that there are, you know, seemingly, you know, winds of change blowing around the African continent. I am, though, very cautious, you know, as I look around. I'm optimistic, but I'm cautious because I've seen, you know, how, you know, these people hijack political movements and the legitimate aspirations of our people. As have happened here in South Africa, our people deserve freedom from apartheid, and that was unfortunately hijacked, that aspiration, you know, in the form of the ANCs. Many of them have sold out to the Jewish elite in South Africa that have continued the plunder of our country. So I'm hopeful, but I would, you know, urge people to be cautious. We must not let our guard down anywhere. We must all, you know, watch what's happening in Senegal very carefully. We must, you know, pray for, you know, our young leader there to be successful. And we must watch out that they do not try to, you know, with their nefarious tactics to undermine him in any way whatsoever. Freedom is not going to be easy and quick. We have to be vigilant all the time. Coming to the situation in South Africa, Sister Shanice, look, I don't want to sound arrogant at all, but one, it's very difficult to find, you know, leaders on the ballot currently. I'm the only, you know, political leader in the country that speaks out against the dominance of the Jewish elite in South Africa. And that, you see, at the moment, the political question in South Africa is about who will remove the ANC and who will replace the ANC. That's the African National Congress, the, you know, political party of Nelson Mandela, that ushered in sort of freedom in 1994. So they've been ruling the country for 30 years now. And now the question, and obviously the people of South Africa have suffered in these 30 years. People in South Africa have been fooled into thinking that it is the ANC, but we should explain to them it's the Jewish elite. There's no political party, no political movement that does this. On the ballot as well are tons and tons of Jewish-funded political parties and candidates. And so it's a gamble. The South African people don't know who to pick. And what I'm saying now with this boycott, I would have participated in this election even against the odds reluctantly. I complained about this situation to the IEC even last year. But now my mind is made up because of what the IEC have done. I'm urging the people that we cannot go ahead with these elections. This would be gambling with the future of our country. What we should instead do is to boycott. Now, how does the boycott work? We need to, you see, in South Africa, we do not have minimum turnout rules for the election. So in some countries, you have a rule that says if less than a certain percentage of the people vote, then the election cannot stand, the result cannot stand. Now, we don't have such rules in the country, but we have to force them. So here I'm calling for that less than 30% of the people shouldn't vote. Sorry, we should ensure that more than 50% of the South African people don't vote. If that happens, then whoever is the government will be a minority government, just like the apartheid government, and would have no legitimacy. And we would ask them to resign and install an interim government so that we can have fresh elections that are safe without any potential traitors or sellouts on the ballot.
Yes, beloved, I hear that as a strategy. You know, it's so awful and it's so unfair that the elections are going to be going ahead anyway, and that, you know, we have to be in a situation where we're calling for a boycott, because then, you know, there's no guarantee, even if less than 50% were to turn out, that the one that was elected with maybe say 30% of the vote doesn't just go ahead and become the leader anyway. You know, this is absolutely dreadful. And you said you're the only candidate that is, you know, voicing opposition to the Jewish control in the country. And are you the only one who happens to have been withdrawn from the elections paper, or are there others who have also been withdrawn? And if so, can you see any patterns?
There are others, and yes, there are patterns. It is mostly those parties that obviously they have not spoken out as much as I do, or to the extent, you know, finger directly the Jewish elite, but they have spoken out against the system. They are unhappy with the current status quo of the exploitation of our people. So that is a common denominator between us. But yes, I'm not the only party. The other parties have sought the route of going to the electoral court to fight their way back onto the ballot. I have decided no, you know, we have to make a bigger stand here. This is a bigger problem. You see, in South Africa, the people have been aware of a phenomenon called state capture. You know, very strange that the Jewish elite has pushed such an idea onto the minds of the people. But I'm sure a few years ago, people around the world have heard about this state capture commission or whatever that happened here in South Africa. Now, of course, we know that state capture commission was not genuine. It did not focus on the bigger Jewish capture, you know, of our country, but it focused on some small capture. But in any case, it did introduce the idea in our country that political leaders can be bought, and they are traitors, and this they can be bribed to take the entire system of government to the benefit of a few private people. Now, this does not, what I'm trying to now explain to the South African people, this capture does not start after an election. It starts before an election. It starts with a stage managed election. And we now have to realize that, and we have to prevent that. And you must remember also, the South African people have suffered much. We have suffered about 300 years of colonialism, apartheid. Now, for the last 30 years, we've lived through the disappointment of the ANC. So the people's patience have gone very short. So my point is, I'm going to raise the issue that we might sit here with an illegitimate government. And so what will happen is, if people start realizing that sooner or later the people will, you know, take power back, and if a government wins an election and only 30% has voted for them, that is the beginning of the end. You must understand that it's the beginning of the end. If that government, I guarantee you, will not be able to put in place the reforms necessary to improve the lives of the people. And then the South African people will, in a peaceful manner, have the revolution they deserve. Because this is what I'm advocating in South Africa, peaceful revolution. Freedom cannot be won purely by an election. There needs to be a change in the people. There needs to be such a strong change that they must know that the system that is exploiting them is illegitimate. And at the moment, not enough of them know that. And the moment they know that, it will be easy for us to move to freedom. So that is why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Thank you so much. And for those who have just joined us, I just want to let you know that we are interviewing our beloved brother, Ricardo Maarman. He is a social activist and leader in South Africa. He was a presidential candidate for the forthcoming election, but we're just hearing from him that he has been removed from the presidential candidacy list. No good reason has been given for his removal. He is, you know, one of the only candidates who's standing on, you know, an anti-imperialist, pro-African stance. Very concerned about, you know, South Africa, the impoverishment of the people, etc. And majorly disappointed now to hear that, you know, because of movements that's been happening behind the scene, that he won't actually be running for his party. His party is the Azania political party. Let me just go over to the chat, beloved, and just welcome our audience. To those of you who are in the house, Welcome, welcome. We're having a conversation focused on South Africa for the first part with our guest, Brother Ricardo. For the second part, or I think maybe even during the first part, we're going to be joined by our brother Irritated Genie all the way from the USA. He's actually making his way home now so that he can get to actually get to the computer. So let's go over to the chat. I want to welcome all of the family in the house. Please do remember to give us a thumbs up. Let us know where in the world you're actually viewing us from. Welcome, 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 Brother Kwame. Good to see you in the house. He's bigging us up. Thank you so much. He's saying, yes, Sister Shanice and Baba Clyde Winters inspiring us about our original history. Fearlessly so, absolutely. Welcome, Sister Betty. Good to have you in the house as well. Also good to have PK Kasserim in the house saying great conversation. Thank you so much. Kwame saying that the West should keep their beaks out of our elections in Africa. Welcome, Brother Anthony. Welcome, Jasia. Yes, Irritated Genie will be joining us. He'll be coming on next. Brother Thomas, welcome. He's got a question. He says, why are you just against the Jews? What about the Indians and the other Europeans that are controlling the economy? Are we blaming the Jews too much? Let's go over to you, beloved, for a response to that question.
Thank you very much. A very good question. Look, as I say, the biggest problem in South Africa is a Jewish elite, that dominates our economy and dominates our society in ways that you cannot imagine. Academia, every part of South African life that matters is dominated by a Jewish elite. Of course, here I don't want to target every single Jewish person that there is, because of course not every single one of them is part of this. But there is quite a contingent, in the Jewish community that is dominating South Africa. Yes, there are other problems as well. There are other communities as well. But the complexity in South Africa is this, that like you see now in America and many other parts of the world that this might be happening, is that the elite that dominates South Africa, they import other communities into the country as well. And this causes a dislocation. And what they do is they use some of these other communities, like, for example, the Indian community, etc., as a buffer community. Even to extent the white or the Afrikaners that was here in South Africa, they were also used as a buffer by this elite. And so they are at the coalface or at the front of some of the oppression and exploitation. Yes, they have, some of them have a hand in this exploitation, but usually there is networks with them and the Jewish elite that run South Africa. So yes, this is a problem altogether. But I think it is important for us to go to the root and the heart of the problem. And the heart and the root of the problem is that there is a very wealthy, powerful, influential Jewish elite that are causing serious problems in our country and exploiting our people. One of those, I don't know the platform here, but one of the issues in South Africa is that we are a very conservative nation. We are very conservative, and we oppose the LGBTQ and that sort of thing that is being pushed in South Africa, but it's being imposed. But the outside image of it is that, South Africa is like that, the only African country that allows such a thing. But it's because of the dominance of this elite and the people that work around it that can push these things through, and also because of the extent to which they've compromised the ANC and the political system. Any political party in South, I'm probably going to say a lot that we are the only ones who are doing that, but I don't know any other political leader in South Africa that will even open their mouth and say, look, I have problems with LGBTQ, because the barrage that you would get attacks from everybody here, media, etc., would be huge. But I'm prepared to say that, and our people are suffering in silence with this kind of issue. So yes, I do take that on board. I'm aware of the racial and other issues with other different groupings in the country, but we have to tackle things at the root. I think if we do that, we'll make progress.
As you said, a very complex situation in South Africa, indeed, regarding, the different groups within the country. I wonder if you could comment for us on the xenophobia attacks that we have seen. Those of us from the diaspora, those of us from other parts of Africa, the media has, shown very graphic, images and videos of, other Africans being attacked in South Africa because of the xenophobia is there. And some people might ask, well, why are South Africans attacking other Africans? Yet, as we've just talked about, there are all these other groupings in South Africa who have been manipulating, controlling, undermining, and depriving Africans of so much. What is the situation? You talked about the deception of the media in terms of the LGBT agenda and the impression that that gives to the outside world. We've certainly got an impression of South Africa in terms of xenophobia, which we just don't understand. You talked about the apartheid era, and you're well read, very well the support that South Africa has had from the rest of the world in order, for apartheid to get rid of apartheid in South Africa. So what is it with this xenophobia in South Africa? Can you explain it for us, please?
Look, there's a combination again. South Africa is a very, very complex country. So this is again part of the complexities, but there are underlying, fundamental issues that one can zone into. It makes it more simple. But to give you sort of an example of it, South Africa is not mismanaged. Maybe we can touch a little bit on the book that I've written, the Subversion of South Africa. So South Africa is being subverted. It is systematically being broken down, and the people in our country are being stirred up against each other. There's also an attempt, to stir up, black versus black and African against African. This kind of thing is happening there as well in South Africa. You see, to give you without going into too many of the complexities, but just to give you an example here. So you have a group of misleaders. So you have a group of political leaders that are pointing in that direction. As I am making the issue of that our problem is a Jewish elite, and I'm not here advocating that people should go and be violent against, this Jewish elite and burn them and all that. I'm not advocating that. I'm advocating that people should be aware of them, know what they are doing, and that we should follow lawful and moral means to crush their power in the country, because what they are doing is immoral. But we are not a lawless people, and we are not a people of wanton violence, etc. So we have to approach this with a moral, wise, measured, but still strong way. Now, there are other leaders in our country, unfortunately, that are not doing that. And I believe many of them might be on payroll of some of the elite because it serves that purpose. And their purpose is, you see, when the South African people, maybe I should make my analogy first and explain to you the dynamics. So the analogy is, you take, I think people do the experiment, you take ants, you put them in a cup or something, and you shake them. They can be at peace with each other, but when the cup is shaken, then you find a situation that they start biting and eat, at each other. So that is, in a nutshell, what is happening. The conditions that our people are living in, and many of these xenophobic attacks that they coin them like that. You must understand. There's also an attempt in South Africa to try and, a similar tactic that is used, that the Jewish elite uses with anti-Semitism. So if there are certain incidents happening between any two people, then that incident is a normal incident. It's a violence or whatever that is happening, right? When there are certain incidents that happens now with a Jewish individual, it's anti-Semitic. Now, the same situation in South Africa, when there's incidents happening between two Africans, one South African and another, and one that is not South African, then the media jumps on this issue. It doesn't matter where it is, and it labels it xenophobic. Now, part of the reason is because the media is trying to limit speech in South Africa that is directed at South Africa securing the borders, making sure that the country is orderly, etc. You must understand, we have bought a land border in South Africa, I think, of 4,000 kilometers. We have a sea border of another 4,000 kilometer sea border. The amount of smuggling in South Africa is unbelievable. The drug addiction of our youth is shocking. We have destroyed generations in our country. And when there are sober people speaking up and saying we have to have better management of our borders and control, then the label of xenophobia is latched on them. So what I can say to the world, the South African people are not xenophobic. We have produced some of the greatest Pan-African leaders. Like I've explained to you, Pan-African leader, Professor Sobukwe. What you are seeing in South Africa is one, is propaganda. Two is our people's frustrations are being used to direct at certain people that are not the problem. They are being directed at fellow Africans that are not the problem. I have explained to you what I believe the problem is. So these are the conditions, the situation in South Africa. Propaganda, political agendas, pushed by the elite, the media emphasizing certain things. There are agent provocateurs. So there are political leaders within our communities that are misleading our people. Our people, as I said, for 30 years, they are still living in poverty and degradation and frustration. And that is being used now to say, turn against. This is your brother from Zimbabwe that is causing all of these problems to you. Some people are saying that, and it's wrong. It is not, our brother from Zimbabwe that is our problem. We know who our problem is.
That's right. Thank you so much for giving us an insight into what's happening in South Africa in terms of xenophobia and how the media is whipping up that kind of agenda. We do know that, but the sites of the burnings and the burning down of properties and businesses and that sort of thing, the message needs to get back to South Africa. But it seriously impacts us as Africans everywhere. When we see any African brother or sister, being targeted like that. Now let's go back over to the chat to see if we've got any questions. Welcome to those of you who are joining us. We've been joined by Mundele, who says, Yenge Impimpa Kiambote, Sister Shanice, greetings, brothers and sisters. The Congo leopard is in the house. And he's saying, why call in the brothers who help you lessen the impact of apartheid are today called, what's it, Makwiri Kawiri? Makwiri Kawiri. Have you heard that saying, beloved?
Sorry. Yes, I've heard that. Like I say, I want to make it clear, that South Africa, we are one of the most diverse countries, even on the African continent. So we have people with blood ties, and I'm not too big fan of genetic science and all of that, but we've got ties with people all over the African continent. And we very much regard ourselves as a very important role player on the African continent. Give you an example of what is happening in South Africa so that you understand that what you see is not normal. The country is being subverted. You see, let's just focus, because I think there might be a heightened emotions on this issue, but just for you to give a perspective, let me move on to the issue of racism between African and the white people in South Africa and explain to you, even that one is something that has been created, by a Jewish elite in our country. You see, there was a time in South Africa after the Anglo-Boer War when there was poverty amongst the white people in the country. Okay, they came into the country as settlers, etc., and there were extreme poverty amongst them just after the war. And this poverty became a problem for the Carnegie Foundation. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the Carnegie Foundation in America. So this Carnegie Foundation came to South Africa during this period. This is maybe 100 years ago or so, just after the war. And they made an investigation in South Africa with these white people that were so poor. And these white people started to integrate with the black people in the country. And so what they said was, there was now, the term that the Carnegie Foundation came up with was the Bantuization of white people. So that means white people were becoming Bantu. And this needed to be stopped. And so the Carnegie Foundation basically advised the Afrikaner government, or the white government then, advised them to put up these racial policies to prevent the Bantuization of these white people. Okay, so that was done maybe 1920s or so in South Africa. Then fast forward to the 1980s, and I want you to remember this in the background of the racial problem that you've always seen in South Africa, apartheid, etc. Then fast forward to the 1980s, just before the ANC was supposed to come to power. Guess who comes back to South Africa again to make another study? Remember, in 1920, they did a study on white poverty in South Africa. Now they came back to do a study on black poverty in South Africa. Same Carnegie Foundation. And now they recommended affirmative action. We call it slightly different here, but I think in England and other places you are familiar with that term.
Yes,
But
yes.
affirmative action, etc., they had these policies, and these policies formed the bedrock of the policies that the ANC did. Now, you must understand, the affirmative action policies that the ANC did in South Africa was not to empower and to develop the African people, not at all. Otherwise, you would not see the amount of poverty amongst African people, growing poverty that you still see. But what it did cause, you see, the first report on white poverty created apartheid, which created resentment between African and white people in the country. Resentment that up to this day still, and you saw the bad images on South Africa, people being burned, etc. The same is happening now, and the same is done by the Carnegie Foundation. So what I'm explaining to you here is this was how the subversion took place and how white people in the country, African native people in the country were pitted against each other while a Jewish elite dominates at the top. Now, the same thing with what our brothers have mentioned, our sisters mentioned here with the xenophobia. South Africa is being demonized. Our people are being pitted against each other. This is an agenda against us, because they know that Africa is stronger with South Africa being part of it, welcomed, and we all work together. And so therefore, and we are, one of the most developed countries on the continent. South Africa has got the potential to become a leader on the continent and a leader in the world if we manage to get our country fully back. But now what is happening is there needs to be a wedge driven between South Africa and the rest of Africa. And this is xenophobia. And this is this agenda. And I'm not saying that there are not willing people, leaders inside who are doing that. There are, of course, but that's how it works. There are always agents and traitors amongst us that help this process of demonization. I said a lot, but I think that should give you an idea that these racial issues and these things don't just happen.
Yep, there are players behind the scenes that are definitely gaslighting the racial tensions that exist everywhere. Let me just go over to the chat and see if we've got any questions there for you before I give you some more questions that I might have. Welcome, Jasia. Good to have you in the house. Welcome, Mahat Sisterhood as well. Good to have you in the house all the way from Jamaica. We got Jamaica in the house. Hotep, welcome, welcome. Mahat Sisterhood said the African diaspora tourism is in the house as well. Sister Oshun here. Welcome, welcome. Glad to have you in the house, most definitely. Let's see if we got any questions here as well. Brother Geb, welcome. Great to have you in the house all the way from the USA. He says, how will becoming a politician, a European construct, solve or resolve the problems of Africans in South Africa?
A very good question. But I want to say, look, I think it's a bit unfair to give Europeans such a great accolade that they are the inventors of politics. Look, by all counts, we have the oldest civilizations in the world, and even here in South Africa in particular, I think there has been independent studies, etc., done that proven we have some of the oldest African tribes here, that are the ancestors of other African tribes around the continent and of even people in other continents. So I think if you just look at this chart and you see, coupled with that, there is no other way for human society to organize itself other than to have some form of political process of electing leaders, etc. We human beings are a social creature, and the questions of how we are going to organize ourselves is a political question. And there is no way that anyone can convince me that this was a question that the Europeans solved. And that when we speak about how we are going to, organize our society for our benefit, that this is somehow a European thing. So my brother, I would strongly disagree. My little knowledge of politics and history is that we precede, many of European civilization. So And you could do, I hear, Sister Shanice have spoken about this briefly here, but linguistic studies, many studies would show you that our civilization proceeds. And we have had great empires. South Africa is a fairly new and young country, but even here we've had great African empires, and they managed political affairs, complex political affairs. So no, politics is not the exclusive terrain of Europeans. They of course have their politics as well, but we have ours, and there's no monopoly on this.
Thank you very much for that response. I just want to continue to welcome those who are joining us in the chat. Yeah, please do put your questions and I'll go over to your questions. Well, welcome, Carol from Maryland, USA. Good to have you in the house. AAA Vibes in the house. Hey, where are you watching us from? Let me ask you the question about land. The very sensitive issue about land. As you said, South Africa, the indigenous people, the original people, some of the oldest people on the planet, if not the oldest people on the planet. South Africa, that region of Africa, has belonged to the original indigenous people for possibly millions of years. But today, I don't know if you know the percentage in terms of what percentage do the indigenous people own of Southern Africa compared to the percentage that's owned by white people or other foreigners. But, what's your party's view on that very sensitive issue?
Look, it's without a doubt, part of the reason that we are fighting is because our people have been dispossessed. And this is the issue. The native people of this country has been dispossessed. And the land distribution in South Africa is not fair. It's not just at all. This is it's a very sad situation here. If you come to South Africa, it will bring tears to your eyes, where you see people are living in South Africa. They're born here. Their forefathers, lived here, and they lived very nice lives before. Now they live as refugees in their own country. They stay in temporary shelters. They live from hour to hour, not even day to day. Recently in South Africa, there was in the Eastern Cape where I come from, the poverty is so extreme. In a rich country like this, I could spend an whole hour explaining to you how rich our country is. And that will show you the crime that is being committed against our people. But in the Eastern Cape, there were mothers that didn't have the capacity to feed their children, and they decided to kill themselves and their children. That is how bad the poverty is. So 100%, we have, and people have to feed themselves off the land. Our people have been deprived of that. South Africa is a very big country, relatively, especially if you compare it to European countries. Africa is very big as a whole. As they don't draw Africa properly on the map. Only people who really measure geographically will see how huge Africa is. But just put it into perspective from South Africa. South Africa, we've got a population of about 60 million people or so. Okay, we are 5 times the size of the UK. 5 times. You can fit the UK 5 times into South Africa. And the UK's population is bigger than South Africa's population. And in the UK, you found a way to, or they found a way to manage the, land sharing and whatever amongst each other fairly well. Of course, much of the, the wealth that the people of the UK enjoy is on the back of South Africa, amongst others. We export an enormous amount of fruits and all kinds of resources to the UK to make life there easier and nicer. But regardless of that, we have enough land in this country. The problem to share amongst the people very nicely. If you drive in South Africa, you can drive hours and not see anybody. We've got big land in the country. The problem is in our country is not the land issue. Land is not our problem. Our problem is we have traitors who are running our country. And these traitors are working in cahoots with a Jewish elite that is robbing our people, that is using the law, etc., to deprive our people. Sometimes they have programs in South Africa where they say, we'll give people the land. So they give them land and they give them nothing to work the land with, no finances, nothing. And so eventually the people say, I've got the land, but I can't work it. I don't know. I can't do this. I can't do the other. So people sell the land back again so that they can have financial resources. So there's all kinds of tactics that are being employed here. And that's why I'm saying there are politicians in this country, I won't name them, that make land the primal issue. But in a country with as much land as ours, this is not the problem. Problem is traitors and exploiters that are collaborating with each other to deprive our people of the benefits of the vast and beautiful land that the Almighty has given us.
If you were elected president, what would you do about the land disparity? What would your policies be to redress the land situation?
Yes, of course, we will have to address there are huge monopoly land holdings in the country. The Jewish elite are the biggest land owners in South Africa, especially through the banking system. Most of South Africa's private-owned land is bonded in any case. So the first thing that I would do is, of course, is to look at that reform. There are people in South Africa that own far too much land, and that is not the average person. Most important thing I would do, though, is to look at the banking system, the usury, the predatory lending. I would try to free up some financial resources for our people so that they can develop the land. I would spend more money on our people's, on technological development, on our people's skills, etc., so that they can work the land. You must understand, our biggest problem in this country is that our people's hands are being shackled from working this beautiful land. You must remember, some of the people that are dying of poverty in the Eastern Cape is, as I told you, we've got a 4,000-kilometer coastline, 4,000 kilometers of fish and whatever you want to call it. We straddle two oceans, the Atlantic Ocean and the Indian Ocean. Imagine the fish that people can eat off here. But we have politicians who's made it illegal for our people to fish. You need fishing license. You need a fishing license. Otherwise, you can't feed your family. And the fishing license goes to some of the big, companies that are fishing the waters empty and big trawlers. So I'm just giving you one example. So here you have a 4,000-kilometer coastline. People are dying of poverty on that coastline because they can't fish. Why? Because you need a license. You need a license to fish there. And of course, the politicians, being bribed as they are and being captured as they are, make those available to certain people. So I repeat the issue. The issue is not scarcity of land. The issue is traitors in government. And the issue is that these traitors collaborate with people who are plundering the vast, beautiful resources that the Almighty has given us.
Thank you so much. As you can see, family, we've been joined by our brother, Irritated Genie. Rise up, rise up. Welcome, welcome. We've been having a really interesting conversation with our brother, Riccardo. I'm glad you managed to come in before he has to go. Brother Irritated Genie, thank you for the introduction to our brother, Riccardo. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic, and I was fortunate enough to speak to him before the program, so he said he can stay the whole 2 hours. So I've been listening.
Okay.
This is an outstanding program.
Oh, have you? Okay, well, now it's going to get even more interesting that you've joined us. Thank you so much. Brother Irritated Genie, I can't take it for granted that we don't have some new viewers who may not have met you before, may not be aware of you and the great works that you do. So I wonder if you could briefly introduce yourself to the audience.
Sure. So I'm Irritated Genie in Southeast, also known as Ayo Kimathi. From Washington, D.C. I'm an African nationalist. I'm a social architect. Good friend of Sista Shanice here. Love her just as much as all the rest of you out there. She's doing phenomenal work, doing a lot of social activism. I'm a social architect and doing a lot of work for, we classified as African survival in the 21st century. We have to know that we're facing a threat to our survival, I mean, actual racial survival, and we have to do something to secure that survival. And that's been the predominance of our work in the 21st century that we're doing. So that's a little bit about me.
Thank you so much. So family in the chat, please welcome our brother, Kamani, our brother who we know as Irritated Genie. And if you have any questions for him too, please do put it in the chat. If you have any questions for our brother Riccardo, please also do put it in the chat. Brother Ricardo, back to you. You know, we've been hearing a lot about, you know, the Jewish elite that are primarily responsible for a lot of the problems that we're talking about in South Africa. Are we able to identify specifically who these groups of Jewish elite are? Are they a number of families? Can they be named? Do people know, you know, who these people are? Okay.
Yes, thank you, my brother, and good to see you, my brother Ayo Kimate. It's an honor to see you and to share this platform with you, and thank you for holding up the book. Yes.
So the answer's in the book. So give us a brief synopsis, and also, yeah, do plug the book. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, look, definitely. I mean, there are specific families, but I think, you know, there are specific Jewish families that dominate our country. They work together as quite a cohesive group. The one most prominent of these is probably the Oppenheimer family. So you must remember, a very strange thing has happened. You are in the UK currently, but as I explained in my book, you know, the subversion of South Africa, a strange thing happened in this country. The British Empire came to our country, fought war against the tribes here, crushed them. You know, some of the military force that they spent in this country was enormous against the great Zulu kingdom, the Xhosa kingdom, against all of our people here. And after they crushed our people like that, they handed over this wealth, the mines and the diamonds and all of that. They handed it over to a German family, okay? To a German family. The Oppenheimers are originally from Germany, and they inherited by far all of this great wealth that the British Empire conquered in South Africa. So they are the dominant ones, but there are many others. You see, there was an immigration of you know, Jewish elites and Jewish people dominating the country from various parts of the world. England, Germany, when the Dutch came as well, there was quite a few coming in from that side of the world. Lithuania. So in terms of our legal system in the country, our legal system is Lithuanian. You know, that much of the Lithuanian Jewish community came over to South Africa and dominated our legal system. This is our judiciary, for example. These are our activists in trade unions, etc., in the country. And of course, in terms of family names, as many, you know, some of your listeners might be aware of Slovo, you know, Joe Slovo. He was a prominent role player in the ANC, Ronnie Kasserls, too many to mention, probably. Please ask everybody to go and purchase the book. And this will explain to you precisely how, you know, they have come to dominate the country, the networks that are there, the people, the migrations, etc.
The Subversion of South Africa. And can they get that via Amazon? Or is there a particular site that they need to go to get the book?
Yeah, it's not on Amazon. There's a particular site. It's called zarabooks.com. So that is XARRA books.com. So they can click on there and look for the Subversion of South Africa, and they can find the book there.
Okay, thank you so much, everybody. Please support. Do get that book. Let's go over to the chat. Let's see what questions we've got here. Ghana, Africa in the house. Ghana, Africa in focus. Says Caucasian people are living like kings and queens. I think that's in response to, you know, the description that you gave us, that really harrowing, awful description of how people are living right now today in some parts of South Africa, one of the richest pieces of real estate on the planet. Rather irritated Genie. You know, we've been hearing about the huge disparities in wealth. You know, we've been hearing how, to a large extent, South Africa's wealth is in the hands of foreigners, it's in the hands of people who are, you know, not even indigenous to South Africa. And, you know, they're keeping all of this wealth for themselves, not sharing it with the people. The people are dying, starving, taking their own lives and the lives of their babies. I mean, what can you say about the situation, and what would your advice be to their presidential candidates, please, in South Africa about the situation?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I want to say, I don't want to answer that. Really want to thank you, Sister Shanice. I was listening to this program for the last hour, and it was shocking me. I just want to say this to the audience as I move towards answering your question. And I asked somebody this that listened to another interview he did recently on Brother Amos. You had Brother Amos on recently when he was dealing with what was going on in Kenya. And he interviewed the brother. And something hit me, and it hit me starkly, and it hit me again listening to you interview him. This is the first time that I've ever heard, and for people that don't know, this gentleman, I know he explains some things, but he's kind of a humble brother. He's actually the next president of South Africa. The only thing between him and being president of South Africa has nothing to do with the people's voting, has nothing to do with the resources, even though they're trying to block him from resources. Every day people don't have $20,000 to put on the table to say, I'm going to run for a president. And that wasn't even something that was done before this year. So no matter what barriers have been put up, this is the man of the hour. What is amazing, the only thing that's preventing that is that literally there are outsiders from outside of Africa who he's now not just talking generalizations, he's honing in and identifying who are trying to prevent him from getting there because he's come out publicly. And he's doing it here on your program. And I want people to hear this because we're living in a moment in time. I don't even think sometimes we realize what we're dealing with. We've been asking for someone all over the world, African people have been asking. We get a Brava Traore, and it looks beautiful now. We're happy. Mali, we call it One Africa, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, and we're happy, and that looks good, and I like what I see happening there. Now, in a region, we saw Senegal. I heard you mention that earlier. It looks good. We are happy about that, what we're looking at. We want to support that. But now in the country where we've seen the most white or foreign domination in Africa, I would say of any country in terms of particularly white as opposed to Arab domination, we've not seen anything like this, where there's a leader, he's not pontificating, he's not coming close to saying who's doing it. He's identifying the source of the problem, giving us the intimate details to understand, even as we relate to black and white, who's maneuvering that and what their objectives are. I've been reading the book. It's incredible. And he has a public platform of saying the Oppenheimer cabal and control and dominance of our wealth and resources is not going to continue under my presidency. We've been saying we want someone like that. We've been talking about why don't we do this and that. Now we have one. We should not expect them to make it easy for him to let us know that he's legitimate. I've been there. I'm telling you, I'm not talking like speculative. I was physically on the ground there. This is the real deal. Like what we have here, when you're talking about that wealth issues, we have someone who I am confident in saying this. And for people that are familiar with me, you know this. I don't put out a whole bunch of people and say I'm confident in this person like that. I'm confident in myself. I'm going to be honest. I am confident when this man wins the presidency in South Africa, we're going to have to make sure he has the best security ever, because this notion of others other than African people owning the land and controlling South Africa and it not being an African nation, it will again be an African nation, not just with the majority on the ground being African, but meaning the wealth and the resource and the culture will again be African. We have a guy here. We're not talking speculative. We're not guessing. He's here. He's publicly saying what white people in the world don't want to say. I'm going to say that again. I wrote the book because I know everybody's afraid of it. This is the book, okay? This is my book. I just showed it. I didn't say it. I did not know this gentleman was there. If I had known, he'd be all in my book. He wrote the same book. And I'm reading it, and the pieces that I didn't even know that I didn't have, I'm telling you, the wealth of information. I want to say this one thing, and I'm hoping, because I know I'm talking, but I'm excited about this. In this book, he says something that resonates so freely with me, particularly because I'm in this country watching the same thing happening, but it's different. In this country, there's a white uniparty, both of them doing the same thing. Republican and Democrat, it means nothing. They're both controlled by the same group that he said is controlling South Africa. That's the bottom line. They're owned by that group. And before they get elected or when they get in office, they have to sign an agreement that they will be loyal to that nation that's over there murdering those people that we see them murdering right now to be in office in the US. In his book, this book here, I'm going to show it again, The Subversion of South Africa. And he says it so, I mean, it's so eloquently stated. He says the EFF, the Economic Freedom Fighters, which we're all so happy to love and be supporting. And I'm not talking about the people who are genuine in it, but from the highest level, who's funding it. He says them, the DA, and the ANC are all the same party. He said there's not a difference in the parties. They're all controlled by the same group. They just give you these three different parties, three different puppet groups that they control so that you feel like you have a choice. And then when a real choice like Brother Ricardo Maarman pops up, then all of a sudden you don't get a choice because he's a genuine choice where real change will occur. I would say this, and because I know I can talk, but I'm going to say this. I really want to say, I mean this when I say this. The international community, which is why I'm so glad your program reaches an international African audience. We can't allow an individual like him who represents our interests to be in isolation fighting for his country. No, he's fighting for the future of Africa because when South Africa and the wealth of South Africa is taken out of the hands of the problem and put back into the hands of the African people on the ground, the wealth is redistributed. We have one of the most wealthy nations on the world now in the control of our people, and it's on our continent. So it can't offend but too many people because it's our continent anyway. It's not like we're going into Europe. It's not like we're going into Asia. We're on our continent with our resources, with some stability on some level. And now that's part of the puzzle that we need to deal with the wealth gap in the world and the economic situation Black people are facing because other people control our wealth. In answering your question, how do we fix it? I really mean this when I say this. We have it happening in West Africa right now. We love it. We have it happening in Senegal. That's West Africa too. Another one, hopefully Senegal will join the other three countries and now One Africa grows larger. But now we're talking about connecting the wealth of West Africa. God forbid Nigeria jump on board and do the right thing and get involved with that. And then connecting down to South Africa. There was a book. It was written by a white guy. And it was called Tribes, I think. And in the book, he was talking about the wealth of the world. And he said the world is going into different tribes. He was saying Arabs, Christian, Muslim. He was saying the different groups. And then he said, Black people just don't get it. He said they just don't get it. He said, however, if Black people understood their wealth and how wealth worked, if Nigeria would connect through Congo down to South Africa and they would actually stabilize themselves, this is a white man. He said, overnight, they would become the world power. And this is a white guy talking. I was like, wow. I don't know economics that well to understand that. But this is somebody who was saying the world is moving into tribes, people who are clustering together for their interests. And right now, as we speak on this program, we have a guy who clearly is not a coward. The people here is talking about are the people that run the entire planet. He's saying they will not continue to control the wealth of our continent, and particularly my country. And he's stepping forward in the front and saying, I am responsible for saying that they are the ones that are causing the problems, and I'm going to do something about it. I say personally, he has 100% of my support because I know the kind of courage you have to have inside of you to identify these people. And he doesn't have to try to win by himself. Why can't, like yourself, You're Jamaican, but you're in Gambia, but you live in the UK. So you have a large world audience and they're listening. We'll share this. We'll put it on Telegram, spread it. I know a lot of people in the African world community. I spread it on my video. Why can't we say, this is who we want in South Africa? How many times have we heard someone in South Africa who is an actual politician say, we don't agree with the LGBT, that's not our culture? When have we ever heard that? Like, nobody says that. People are afraid to say that. He said he doesn't agree with it, and that's not our culture, which we already know because we've been doing the research. What else are we waiting for? That's my answer.
Thank you so much, Irritated G. Thank you. Wow. Going over to the chat, they're welcoming you as well, beloved brother. Jamaica Junker's in the house. The Jamaica Junker's in the house. Rise up. Mahat's sisterhood circles in the house as well, and he's asking, what can organized grassroots and political activists do? That's a question to Brother Riccardo.
Know that they can do a lot, you know. I want to say thank you very much, Brother Ayo Kamati, for very kind words. I appreciate that. It's humbling. Look, the grassroots movement can do a lot. You know, I'm advocating in South Africa a peaceful revolution. And this peaceful revolution hinges on two things, and I'll explain where the grassroots comes into that. The one is we have to change the power structure in our country. And as we've alluded to, we cannot say, speak out against it enough. We have to change that power structure externally. But the peaceful revolution also hinges on something else. We have to change something inside of us, you understand? For example, here in South Africa, our people have been experiencing colonialism and oppression for 300 years. Now, if you take a bird and you place that bird into a cage, the first generation will fight back against that cage because they know they don't belong in there. But then there comes a second generation that is born in that cage and they fight less. And a third generation fight less, and so forth, until they feel they belong in that cage. So to free our people just externally by changing the power structure is only half of that. The other half of that is the grassroots work by encouraging a peaceful revolution in our understanding, in how we feel about ourselves, etc. If these two things don't change simultaneously, we won't have real change. And that's why I am applauding, what Sister Shanice is doing here, of making people aware of ancient African culture, because it needs to start there. People need to feel a sense of dignity, pride, etc. And those grassroots movements around should do that. Real change cannot really take place if it is not ignited on the grassroots.
Thank you, beloved. I'm just looking through the chat, the comments as well. Nothing being sent over to both of you. Mandele asked the question, and this question I was going to ask a question about. Ask for your comments and thoughts on South Africa's petition about what's happening in Palestine. But I've got a question that's poised slightly different here by Brother Mandela. He says, how can South Africa be Pan-Africanist whilst it sees the suffering of Palestinians before that of other Africans? Why not be calling internationally justice for Sudan, DRC Congo, Cameroon, Haiti? Let me put that question to our presidential candidate, and then the same question to Brother Irritated Genie, who may want to give a different perspective on that. Over to you first, Brother Riccardo.
Yes, a very good question. Look, firstly, because the issue is so highly political, and the issue is, is embroiled with our ruling elite. Of course, so Palestine is very important to the Jewish elite that dominates South Africa. And so naturally, that is going to be the issue that is going to dominate the airwaves as well here in the media and everywhere in South Africa. And you would be surprised, of course, as South African people, we sympathize with the Palestinians. I sympathize with the Palestinians even more so because of, my awareness of the Jewish elite that dominates South Africa and that has a role to play there. And I know that it is not a far cry that such atrocities can in the near future be committed against the people of South Africa. And I know that such atrocities have also been committed here in South Africa. We have, one of our oldest tribes here, the Khoi tribe. They have almost been obliterated in this country. So recently, one of the Khoi leaders came to me and said, Ricardo, they speak about the genocide in Palestine. When are you going to speak about the genocide of the Khoi people here in South Africa, in the Cape? And I said, yes, we should. This is the right time. Of course, we have been a little bit derailed with the whole election issue. But what I'm saying in terms of, me not being put on the ballot and me now having to boycott the election, etc. But the point I'm raising, Sister Shanice, and to the person who's asking the question, that yes, in South Africa, there is that currents moving. One, that we feel sympathy to the Palestinian people and we condemn the genocide by the Jewish elite against the people there. But in South Africa, we've had a series of genocides that have already been committed in our country that the world does not know about. There are many people, despite the fact that the media flow is not happening, we know about the war that is raging in Congo. We know about the genocide that's happening there. We are aware about the conflict that is happening in Sudan and all of our country. Sad story, though, that most people are not aware. It is the same elite that is behind all of these conflicts everywhere. So, yes, we are aware of this in our country. And the reason why you hear predominance of the issue is because this is an issue that is important for some strategic political reasons to the Jewish elite that dominate our country. But I want to say one of it on this issue, there are plans afoot to crush the South African economy further using South Africa's support or the case that the ANC has taken to the International Criminal, to the ICJ, I think the International Court of Justice. There is now, as we speak, in the American Congress, there are talk of sanctioning South Africa. So the Jewish elite are contacting their guys in American Congress to have South Africa being sanctioned by America, which would be a disaster for our country and cripple our people further. But this is part of the agenda of crushing South Africa. And this is part of the reason why the ANC, I believe, took the case. I do not believe that the ANC took the case to the ICJ purely for altruistic reasons. They had to consult with their, the Jewish elite masters that control them. And there must have been some kind of a trick in there. And one of the tricks is sanctions against South Africa. So I would please like to ask all of those listening, and especially in the United States of America, beware. They're trying to crush South Africa. They're trying to sanction us. Speak out against it there before it even happens. Let them know we know what they're planning to do. They are not fooling us this time.
A follow-up question to that. Why would the Jewish elite be asking the US to impose sanctions on South Africa? Is this to, cripple the people even more? Are these sanctions that they're hoping is just going to justify them making life even worse for the people of South Africa? What is the motive behind this, do you think?
Look, it is for precisely that reason. So there's been several things that has been happening in South Africa to crush the people of this country. So recently, to give you an example, besides the 2 years that we've all experienced when the economies were not operating at optimum levels, so that created quite a big crush in our economy. Then followed on from that has been what we call here load shedding. And I'm sure you probably know it as blackouts, so electricity blackouts. We've had crippling blackouts in this country. Now, I don't know how to explain it to you. South Africa produces coal, and coal is one of the things that is one of the resources used to produce electricity. We have some of the biggest coal reserves in the world in South Africa. And some of these coal reserves we haven't even tapped into, but we have blackouts. And some of our best coal is exported to Germany and other places where they use it to produce electricity. But we do not have electricity in our country. But the fact that we do not have electricity, this industrial infrastructure and base that South Africa has, this needs to be crushed. In order to maintain an industrial base in a country, you have to have a steady and good electricity supply. And so they're crushing them. And so I'm explaining this so you can see there's a pattern developing here. So South Africa's electricity base is being crushed. Then South Africa's got one of the best financial systems in the world, on the African continent, but definitely in the world. Many countries, Middle Eastern countries, whatever, come to South Africa to see how they can develop their financial services sector. We've been grey listed. So South Africa has been grey listed by the international community. And so financial flows and investment flows are not flowing into South Africa as it should. Okay. And now we are sitting on the verge of sanctions. I'm just mentioning a few so that you can see there is a pattern here to crush the South African economy. And so this is why the Jewish elite would want to do this, because they want to crush it. Our people are resilient. You'd be surprised. You go to one of these informal settlements we call squatter camps in South Africa, where people are living in abject poverty, and you'd be shocked. You'd see some of the broadest smiles that you've ever seen. You would see people somehow able to survive and thrive under subhuman conditions. The Jewish elite have been trying to exterminate our people and crush them, but it's not so easy. And that is why they're coming up with newer and more elaborate plans to crush us, as the sanctions plan is.
Thank you so much for that. I also suspect that they see a change of hands happening as well politically. And, they're anticipating, the ANC not being re-elected, and want to make sure that the economy and the country is in as bad a position as possible, for the new government coming in, so they can be blamed for everything. But we'll watch this space. I do want to come back at some point, if not in this show, Brother Irritated, maybe in a future show, to talk about the genocide that's happening in South Africa against some of the particular ethnic groups there. I think we need to expose that, what's going on. The Khoi, one of the oldest groups in the world, on the verge of extinction. I've not heard anything about that. We're going to return to that. Okay, but before, let me go over to Brother Irritated Genie regarding the same question to do with South Africa's position on Palestine, and at the same time ignoring what's happening in the Congo, Sudan, Cameroon, Haiti. Over to you, beloved.
Sure. So, of course, everything he's saying, I agree with, and I'm learning because, of course, he's there. So he will have a better understanding of what the rationale why South Africa is doing what it's doing. The benefit of it in this situation is, no matter how you slice it, it's not just South Africa. What's happening is, people talk about what's happening in Palestine. He talked about what's happened to the Khoi. If we really take a moment and think about it, I would say wisely, which again, I'm going to just hold it up. That's why I wrote this. There's a reason. We have to start thinking about it wisely. Wait a minute. Haiti is under control. When you look at the name of the billionaire who is controlling that and driving that, you see he's Jewish. I mean, this is not anything I'm making up. When you look at the Congo and you look at the companies to see who are the companies that are driving that genocide, we know that they're African leaders who are involved heavily. Who's backing them and funding them? When you do the research, you find out it's the same group. What we're actually witnessing is not a regional attack on anybody. What we see happening in Palestine is just another way that we see it happening in South Africa. If we remember something that occurred that the entire world was shut down for, that I won't mention here, we see now they have 27 million excess expirations of people on the planet. That's what is shown to us. 27 million, that's what is written down, which means it's probably more like 120. We're talking about a mass, almost like a Zulu-styled assault on the entire planet. If people started looking at the assaults like they're talking about the genocide in Congo, you look at who's behind it. You look at what's happening in South Africa, look who's behind it. You look at America and open borders. Who runs the borders? Mayorkas. Mayorkas is what? Jewish. You start paying attention, America is being undermined by the same group. If you look in Europe, they have open borders and everybody's flooding in. They're not doing that to help us. Those are not Black people who have decided this is the country I want to go to for a future. Most Black people in Ireland don't even know where Ireland is on a map. How did they get here? When you look at who funded them and you look at those ships that they were on, they remind you of what? The slave ships, packed like sardines. Who's sending these people to England and Ireland and Iceland and all of these different places? It's the same group. They are literally at the same time attacking the entire world population with a multitude of things that lead to expiration. This brother is talking about one thing, one of the branches off of a monumental baobab tree. You know, it's like a huge tree of expiration, we will say. And all of us are under siege, which creates the necessity, in my estimation, we have to do something that's very difficult for African nationalists. I'm an African nationalist. It's very difficult to do. We look at the world black and white because that's what it's been for us. Black, white, and Arab, you know, Black on this side and everybody else on the other side. Honestly, in this dispensation of time, out of wisdom for survival, I would say it would be wise to take time, look at this brother's book and look at mine, but definitely get this. Please order it today. I had someone I talked to yesterday order 2 of them. I'm reading the book. It's an outstanding book. There's a reason you want to get it. Because in this dispensation of time, where we normally aggregate around the idea of our Africanness, we'll never stop doing that. But there's something else we can aggregate around now. We can aggregate around who's destroying the world. And I'm just going to be honest. When we realize in this dispensation of time, who's destroying the world, we can actually sit down with an Asian and say, you know who's destroying Asia, right? You know who did the Opium Wars. You know that the Sassoon family. You know who they were, right? They were Jews. We can now sit down and talk with the Hispanics and let them know who it is that's coming in and targeting their country. We can now talk to American. I've never in my life talked to any white nationalists or Nazis. I talk to white nationalists now more than I talk to other people, or just as much as I talk to Black folks. Why? It's not about friendship. The entire world is under siege right now. We have to be wise, like our Haitian brothers and sisters. How did they win? They put their emotions aside and said, if the Polish are going to help us fight the French, then the Polish get a pass. They fight good and they okay. To this very day, I know it's not my standard thing to say, but the Polish in Haiti, they okay. Why? Because they fought against the real problem we had, which was the French at that time. They had to go. What I'm saying now, this one group is systematically extirpating the entire planet. All of us can see it. None of us got away in 2020. None of us got away in 2021. Not one of us was able to say that didn't affect me. We're not even talking about how many of us have people that are no longer here. And we know that they were healthy, but they're not here. We know some of them are young and they're not healthy anymore. We know this. We can't escape it. And when we look behind that, who created the technology, because it's not what they call it, it's technology. Look up this name, everybody. Wiseman. That's who created the technology. I'm not making this stuff up. I didn't know. When we look at what's happening around the world, it's the same group. It is time for us to be mature and realize if we want to help Congo, if we want to help South Africa, if we want to help West Africa. In fact, I'm going to say this last thing. I'm going to be honest with you. We got to know what's going on. If we're paying attention after what happened October 7th, which we all aware of, if we were paying attention to the Israelis, they were coming out and publicly saying it. I have the videos. We are going to make sure that when we finish doing what we're doing with the Palestinians, Russia, you're next. We're coming to get you, and you can go ahead and brace. We're making a guarantee we're coming after you. And now what we just saw in Russia was an attack and an assault. For those of us with wisdom, we know who did it. They already told us they were going to do it. It's Israel. If we're wise and we watch the way that Russia responds, I would say this, and this is I'm going to be saying this, so I'm saying it, I think it's perfectly relevant to this conversation. Matter of fact, I know it's perfectly relevant. This is what I would say to every African that's listening. I try to be ahead of everything as much as I can. I'm telling you what the next discussion for Africa is. We're a little bit ahead of the game, but be ahead of the game. I'm telling you it's coming. What Russia is going to do to respond to this act of terrorism from Israel, this group, is going to be legendary. I predict that they are going to be so bad that it's going to be a pancake in Tel Aviv, and that they're going to flee looking for asylum. The most important message for me to give African people, every African nation and every African person worldwide, they cannot seek asylum in Africa. I'm going to say it again. This group that is creating death, carnage, let me say, I was almost about to get a lot of carnage and harm in Africa. They can't come there. It's a coffin for them. They are not welcome. And any leader that offers them asylum should be dealt with swiftly. I'm being clear, like the most important thing in the next 10 years that is coming, and I don't think it's going to take 10 years, Russia's response. I've been watching Mr. Putin, President Putin, have a lot of respect for him. I just watch how they deal with things. This is not a guy you play with. Remember, October 7th is his birthday. That should tell people something. Dugin, people that know, Alexander Dugin got murdered. October 7th, the next year that came around, we saw what happened. I am predicting that they're going to come running, seeking asylum to Africa. Remember, Netanyahu already said, we are finished with Asia, we're coming to Africa. He said that. I think you've seen that, Sister Shanice. Mm-hmm. Brother Maarman, I think you've heard that. Mm-hmm. Our answer universally as African people, you're not coming here because you ain't leaving. Like you're not welcome. We're lucky that they didn't take Uganda when they chose the different places they were going to choose for homeland. We are fortunate they didn't choose Uganda, and we got to make that a permanent mistake that they made. Africa is no home for you. That's what I have to say.
If we can't see what's going on in Palestine right now and learn from it, then, heaven help us. Woo! Lots going on, lots of conversation happening in the chats. Thank you so much for that warning and reminder, Brother Irritated Genie, as well. Very, very important statements you've just been making there. Indeed. We want to welcome Sister Afrijamo in the house. We want to welcome the Ethiopian World Federation in the house. We want to welcome Ma'at Sisterhood Circle. We want to welcome everybody in the chat, the AI show, all the new ones who have joined us fairly late. Do remember the UK clocks have gone forward, so we're actually starting an hour earlier than usual for the rest of the world. Okay, we've now got British summertime in the UK, and so GMT is 7 p.m. start. BST it's 8 p.m. start. Okay, so to everyone who's on the GMT, it is a 7 p.m. start. Rise up, family. And if you're in the neck of the woods where you are, beloved Irritated Genie, what time does our show start where you are? You on
3 p.m.
Eastern Standard Time.
3 p.m. Eastern Time.
Yes.
3 p.m.
Eastern Time. And where you are in South Africa, it's what time does our show start?
9 p.m. 9 in the evening.
9 p.m. South Africa time. Thank you so much. To everybody that's commenting in the chat, thank you. Keep those comments coming in. Time is whizzing by, but we certainly hope that we can continue the conversation with our brothers and sisters in the chat and here on the panel. So much has been said about the situation concerning Israel in Africa, Israel in Palestine, xenophobia, the land issue. If you were appointed president, and there was that swing in South Africa, as we've seen in Senegal, as we've seen in other parts of Africa, the swing towards the young presidents, people who have fresh minds and a heart for the people. If that swing was to happen in your direction and the doors open for you to stand and you were successfully elected, what would your priorities be within the first 100 days? Please, my brother.
Well, look, there's quite a few, that you would start is obviously if you want, corruption to be less in our country, we'll have to clean up our judiciary. As I said, our judiciary is, dominated, from Lithuania, the Lithuanian heritage in our judiciary. So that's one of the things I would focus on. I would also focus on the South African Reserve Bank. The South African Reserve Bank is a private bank. It's the biggest economic problem that we have. If you do not solve the problem of money in an economy that is driven by money, you're going to have a problem. So I would address the South African Reserve Bank. I would not allow, the private manipulation, printing, creation of a currency that is, used by all of us, that affects all of us. So that is an issue that I would deal with swiftly. Take control of the Reserve Bank. Secondly, I would take control of our natural resources. I would make sure that this is taken out of the hands of the Oppenheimers and the Jewish elite that is currently plundering us. Thirdly, I would shore up South Africa's, I'm not saying it in any order, but I would shore up South Africa's military. As I said, we have a almost put together 8,000 kilometer borderline. So I would secure this. A country without secure borders doesn't have sovereignty. And a country that does not have a strong military. So one of the things that I have in mind is to make the military service mandatory for the youth. So this would, for a certain period of time, this is to ensure that, one, we have huge youth unemployment in the country. So to get the youth employed. Also to have a structured way in which to get the youth, that beef up their skills, to make them, to get rid of some of the subversion that they've introduced, the LGBTQ. I know I've been in the UK, I've seen the tattoos all over the place, but I'm not particularly a fan of that. But to make sure that we clean up our youth, that's what the military service would do. Give them skills, to toughen them up, to make sure that, our sovereignty is protected, that whomever that wants to come and colonize us again won't be able to do that. It always shocks and puzzles me. A country that has been colonized and the ANC takes over the country and they do not make sure that our military is one of the strongest militaries in the world. So whoever that colonized us before would never even think of trying to do that again. So that would be a priority there. One of the other things that I would look at as well is, seeing that we might have to exit the UN. Because I believe that the UN, as we see now in Palestine, is doing absolutely nothing other than pushing forward this agenda of the elite, the Jewish elite, fomenting the world into a one world government. So that I would consider. Of course, as well, I'm a strong proponent as well of strong legal system. So one of the things that I would consider as well, have a referendum on, is to bring back the death penalty. Our country has been subverted quite a bit. And as you can imagine, part of that subversion is there are people committing unbelievable atrocities, other than the LGBTQ being all over the place, So these are some of the things that I would put in place. But the priorities would be the Reserve Bank, our natural resources, our military, our judiciary. This is what I would clean up. And above all, of course, I would also like to prosecute, the traitors, those leaders who have betrayed our country, who have sold us out in various ways. Them I would prosecute because we need to set an example. We need to root out the traitors. Otherwise, it's going to recur again. Maybe I'll just end on this point. One of the very interesting things that happened. It's okay. One of the very interesting things that happened was a former president of South Africa, Jacob Zuma. He was also head of intelligence. And he said, during the apartheid period, there was a lot of spies that the apartheid government had within the ANC. Okay, these were ANC double agents. And he says at the end of apartheid, he went to the National Party and he said, hey, give me a list. Give me the list of those ANC spies, so that we can make sure that these guys are not in government again, and continue to betray our country. And he was told they don't have the list anymore. They don't have the list. So what we are seeing today is potentially there are traitors sitting in government, guys who have been on the payroll of the apartheid government, you know. So one of my priorities is that for these many treasonous activities, we will have to clean up. You know, that has to happen. Thank you very much. I've said a lot. I'll end it there.
Thank you very much. A very comprehensive one. Her first 100 days, that would be very, very intense. And yeah, definitely a huge cleanup job that's required. And you would be on it. Yeah, phenomenal. And let me just go over to Brother Irritated June. Brother Irritated June, do you think there's anything that you would want our brother to add to his cleanup job or his priorities within the first 100 days of his government?
You know, I was so moved by what he just said. I'm gonna tell you the part that really hit me. See, I've been to South Africa, 3 times now, and I'm gonna just be honest. When they say Zulu, it's real, you know, Hosai there are war groups there. Like it's surprising that they could be subdued for this long. These are African warriors. Now, they're not in military formation, but they have a brother like this to say, I would have mandatory military service. I think it would be perfect for the men of South Africa, the young people, because they are naturally warriors. I mean, I've been there. There are many different groups. It's not just the Zulus. They're warriors, but they're not given a warrior's training like, you know, that were under the Zulu Empire at one time. What he's saying to get them involved in that and then to give them training from just kind of like the US. You might go into the military, but you might learn to be an engineer. You might learn to be a computer technician. You might learn to be a doctor, but you start going through the military. Honestly, what he said to me, literally, I'm going to be thinking about this all night. It's the prototype for the direction we need to go as African people, because we got to stop pretending like the war is over. Once South Africa gets free, all of Africa has to be free. And why shouldn't we have the process when we get great leaders like this brother in place, that military training, discipline, and education? I would add one thing. You asked a question, and I'm talking my way into it, but it's a little self-serving. But the work I've done with my life is I have looked and analyzed the pieces that are missing that we need to learn and understand to survive. And I've created documents and videos and things of that nature and books for this purpose, for the very thing that we're talking about right now. I would love if he introduced something, a re-Africanization process, because I'm being self-serving. I would love to be able to have a place where instead of me trying to, you know, like some hustler on the street trying to get a person to listen, have an infrastructure where we can say, you want to understand the homophile assault, where it comes from and what it does spiritually, and so that we understand it, so you don't have to worry about anybody getting involved in it. I've already produced it. Can we get it out on a platform like a television station? Can we get it to the masses of people and turn it? Black man and black woman, the love for one another. And this old love everybody, it doesn't work that way. If you love everybody, you have nothing, because you won't produce any more black people. I would love a place that we could teach about our history, like she was saying, in history and culture, and the need for black men to love black women and black women to love black men, and for us to be together again. I was talking to somebody and I thought about this, and I said, I was doing a lecture in Uganda, and I told a story about, almost a creation story, but I said, you know, we were here, God made us, and then we looked around and we saw her. And I was just saying, you know, we were the first people. And I said, we was like, wow, that's for me. I was like, tell me what I need to do. And I'm a happy man. Anything I got to do to have this, I'm good. And I said, you know, I never realized, I didn't think about it till afterwards. I don't think there's anywhere in the world that we basically say, which is we know to be true, that the black man and the black woman were put here to be complementary partners in the journey of life. We know that because we were the first man and woman. That's not a debate. Mitochondrial DNA says that. I was in a room full of young people, and somebody was asking me, why were they responding like that? And I said, well, they're not familiar with this, but it made me think. When has anybody actually stated, where do we teach that? Do they teach that in South Africa? They don't teach it here in America. The black man and the black woman were created to be complementary partners, us with each other. In the journey of life, wherever it goes, we're supposed to be together. And we've been doing that, but we don't teach it anymore. And so we see all this interracial dating and everything like that. For me, my answer to that would be, I would like him to create something to allow people like Sister Shanice, myself, people who all we've done with our life in the diaspora is try to help our people. So we've done a lot of study and we want to give this stuff. We got stuff to give, but it's hard to give because it's hard to get to reach our people directly. With a leader like yourself, if you open it up for us, man, we would come dumping everything we have to help our people. We would be overjoyed because it would give our life the real kind of purpose that we wanted to have from a leadership perspective. Not underground like we've been doing, like this underground, we can't say this, we can't say that. No, come to our country. We're going to look and make sure that you're decent, you're not profanity, you're not running around tattooing everything. But look, are you talking about the development and the upliftment of African people? Is it real? We've looked at it. We like what you're doing. Come give it to our people. And you know what? We the richest country in the world anyway. Here's a few coins on top of it. Why you do it? Do what you do best. Take that, go home and enjoy it. Get your wife something nice. And let's re-Africanize ourselves. That's what I would like.
I love that. Yes, beloved Irritated Genie. Let's go over to our brother Ricardo. If you were to become president, as our brother was saying, you know, there's the diaspora out there, the descendants of those enslaved Africans who were removed from the continent and, you know, don't necessarily know whereabouts in the continent they may originally have come from, but want to return with their skills, their talent, their energy, to give to our motherland. And you know, quite often when leaders of the continent talk about the diaspora, they think about their own citizens who have immigrated abroad. They don't think of us in their constitutions, in their policies, in their legislation. You know, many of us want to repatriate. When we left Africa or when we were taken away, originally we would have had land. You talked about all of that vacant land in South Africa. The same is all over Africa. It's vacant because the descendants, those who occupied the land, were removed from the land. And so the descendants of those who were removed from the land want to come back. And want maybe to have legislation in place, want to have policies in place in terms of land, resettlement programs, access to universities, or to be able to start Africanization universities so that we can begin to Africanize, do the Africanization works. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? I haven't heard it mentioned in anything so far. So thank you, Brother Irritated Genie, because there are the diasporans all over the world listening in right now, from America, from Jamaica, the UK, Europe. You know, we're all here in this chat. Would there be any policies that could be directed at us that would invite us in and offer us settlement in somewhere like South Africa? And how is it that we would be received and welcomed, you know, in somewhere like South Africa so that we can contribute towards its development, its advancement and upliftment?
No, definitely. I mean, that's something that, of course, I mean, when you have all of these things, and that's something that is high on my list of priorities. Because you see, the combination of getting the South Africa to reach its economic potential that I believe it can reach, is we have a skills problem. So what happens is that you know, the Jewish elite in the country has made sure that the education system in the country is poor, that our people are as underdeveloped as possible. You must remember, you know, in the past, before the Europeans, you know, landed in the country, you know, with underneath the guidance of this elite, our people were living in paradise. You know, that they fished and farmed and did all kinds of things. The Zulu kingdom imported maize through the Portuguese, all the way from maize, you know, corn. We call it, you know, maize here in South Africa, corn from South America. So corn from South America was then, you know, worked in South Africa and became the staple food in the country. The point I'm saying is that there was quite a lot of skill and advancement, etc., in South Africa. The Brother Ayo Kimati speaks about the Zulu Empire. So the Zulu Empire, King Shaka, he produced, he had made an order that in his military, there must be stabbing spears produced of exactly the same, the same dimensions. And so these were mass produced, and every Zulu warrior had a few spears to throw, others to stab, etc. I know it's a bit violent, but there was mass production of this. And so you had a steel that was manufactured from, they had to go and see what ore is there. They had to work the ore, mix it with other alloys, work it together. This was enormous skill. But what happened is this skill has been purposefully eroded. We have been subverted as far as this is concerned. So one of the key ingredients to develop South Africa is to fill the skills gap. And one of the things, unfortunately, that I am concerned about, that if I would ever, ascend to power in South Africa, that I would not have a lot of time to close the skills gap before there would be attempts made to try and undermine the country. And if the skills gap is not closed up quick enough, national security is at risk. And so that is one of the first reasons that I would definitely, part of my plans is to encourage the diaspora to return to South Africa and to help South Africa to quickly, fill this skills gap so that we can become robust and strong in a quicker space of time. And who would be best, suited and motivated to come and contribute and loyal, to the cause that we would understand, working towards then our brothers and sisters in the diaspora. And they would be 100% welcomed in the country for the reasons, that these are our fellow Africans, but also, you see, South Africa, unfortunately, was also part of the, the slave trade. There were people from South Africa, especially from our eastern coast. So that is, as Brother Ayo Kemati mentioned about the Zulu kingdom. There were people taken from that part through Mozambique, modern-day Mozambique, and from Maputo, they were then smuggled out of the country. As far as my research is concerned, so these are people taken here from South Africa, from some of our kingdoms here, and they were smuggled out, kidnapped and smuggled out, predominantly by the Portuguese. And the Portuguese were running this, and of course we know the elite that was dominating Portugal then, that was running the slave trade. So there were many of our brothers and sisters that were taken from here. And so South Africa has a responsibility as well. And we welcome, those brothers and sisters back. We don't know where in the world they have been taken to. So for these two reasons, South Africa has, we have that feeling and concerns. And of course, from political strategy and economic development strategy, that would be useful as well. And beyond that as well, I want to say, I've never been very eager to support or speak good of any ANC president's policies, because in the main, they have been treacherous to this country. But one that I have looked positively towards was, the time that President Mbeki, Thabo Mbeki, when he tried to reach out, for example, to Haiti, and Haiti became an issue in South Africa that it was not in many years an issue. And he tried to help with the stabilization, etc. Of course, as soon as he left his presidency, that whole course of action just left. And I have a suspicion that part of the reason that he might have been so early recalled as a president might be his attempts to reach out to Haiti, to have use South Africa's wealth and resources, to reach out to a strategic and very important country like Haiti, for example, to the Caribbean. This was what's happening in South Africa. This was an exciting period of time. I personally, as far as foreign policy is concerned, would revisit that again. I believe that the countries in the Caribbean should be part of a reformed African Union. Those are African countries. Those are African countries, and they should be part of the African Union. And we should be working together. I believe it is not right that African people should be there and not part of the African Union. They have every right to be part of the African, not as observers, but as full members. And I think probably South Africa we would argue that we would exit the African Union as it is, and when we come back in a reformed African Union that is not dominated, with the UN, with their own agendas, but with our agendas for strategic solidarity. So for many, many reasons, South Africa has a need, an urge to reach out and work, with our African brothers and sisters all over. And we have no need for what people want to call xenophobia or whatever. That is preposterous. That is, like I say, that is I hope my explanation of the Carnegie Foundation and their manipulation solves that. And you can understand that the thinking that serious politicians have, there's not many, unfortunately, in the country, is in the opposite direction.
Thank you so much, Brother Ricardo. I think that's the note that we're going to have to end on. It's already the top of the second hour. It's been really interesting and an absolute pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for joining us on this channel. Let's hope that you won't be a stranger and you will come back to talk to us further, maybe after the elections, so that you can give us your reflections on the process and the outcome. And we hope that there is a wind of change so that you will get the opportunity to stand. Brother Io, Brother Irritated Genius, always honor to have you on the platform, for you to come and share your wisdom and insights and perspectives on issues from an African-centered perspective. We wish you all the best with the great works that you're doing on the ground out there. And thank you so much for bringing our attention to this great future leader of the Azania Party and South Africa. To everyone in the chat, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for all your comments. Please do leave a comment outside of the video and give us a thumbs up as well before you leave. And if you're not already a subscriber, please do subscribe to the channel as well. Let me find my promo video that I'm going to go out on. And Brother Irritated Julie, we certainly look forward to you joining us again on another Sista Shanice show. It's you know how much we love you here, and we love your wisdom, and we thank you so much for sharing with us. So family, Sista Shanice out of here for now. Just going to share with you our advert for our forthcoming training course with Dr. Winters. So let's get that one lined up for you and share that. Let's get that in position. Get over here. Where are you? Hang on. It's behind. Come on, get out. I've got so many little things in the way, but you know what, family? It's gonna. Where are you? Let's move that out of the way there, and move you over here a bit. Go into presenter view, and it will open up in presenter view in just a short while. Here we are. Let's line you up. Okay. Hit that button.
Following on from the success of part 1 of the Dr. Winters and Sista Shanice Black History Study course, here comes part 2. Brace yourself as we resurrect more hidden and whitewashed chapters of formidable African history in Britain. Our new groundbreaking 6-week online training course starts on Monday, the 29th of April 2024 from 7:30 through to 9:30 p.m, bringing you facts, evidence and history that your school won't teach you. If you are a Black history enthusiast, if you are a Black educationalist, parents homeschooling your children, Saturday school teachers seeking new material, then this course is for you. Black people have a greater connection to Britain and the British Isles than you could imagine. For registration or more information, go to sistershanice.gumroad.com. That's sistershanice.gumroad.com. Fee £199 with instalment options available. Book before the end of March and get an early bird discount of £50. Check out sistershanice.gumroad.com to download our free brochure. Check out sistershanice.gumroad.com to download our free brochure. See you there.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you, family, in advance. Also, while you're there, get a free copy of the book that I've got for you. That is promoting our wonderful visionary, Marcus Messiah Garvey, a tribute to our great national hero. Get that book absolutely free and distribute it to all of our young visionaries. Thanks so much to everybody for watching this live stream. Join me back here, all being well, same time, 7 p.m. British summertime. No, 7 p.m. GMT time, 8 p.m. British summertime, 3 p.m. ET time, and 9 p.m. South Africa time. Sister Shanice,